Hey guys! So, not in the garage anymore. I went back to Canada for the holidays. I'm not sure if my microphone's gonna be good. I'm using one of those blue snow cones. What are they called? Blue waffles? Blue waffles. They're called blue, something blue. Anyway, I found it in my house. That's the microphone I'm gonna be using. Hopefully, it works adequately. So I'm gonna have to turn my head a bit to talk into it. But I just went out to see Spider-Man No Way Home. Guys, if you've seen any video on this channel, I always trash Disney. So why did I go see Spider-Man? Well, first of all, it's not a Disney movie. It's technically a Sony movie. But I came here, back to Canada, with a childhood friend. We grew up on the Sam Raimi trilogy. It was obvious, okay, we have to fucking see Spider-Man No Way Home. Just for the memes. Just for the memes. I ended up watching Spider-Man No Way Home. This is the first Marvel movie I see since the previous Spider-Man, which wasn't that long ago, Spider-Man Far From Home. Let's talk about my thoughts on the previous two Spider-Man movie. Now, click away. This is going to be spoilers for everything. Spider-Man No Way Home spoilers. Far From Home, Sam Raimi, Spider-Man spoilers, all the spoilers, okay? If you've never seen a Spider-Man movie, don't watch this video. So the previous two Tom Holland movies, Homecoming is okay in my opinion. I feel like it's shot a little flat. I feel like it's kind of annoying that Spider-Man is basically Iron Man Jr., but there's a lot to like in Spider-Man Homecoming. I thought the villain was really interesting in Spider-Man Homecoming, the Vulture. I thought the love interest was interesting as well, the love triangle that was going on. And I love some certain bits in Spider-Man Homecoming, like, do a flip, Spider-Man! Woo! Or with the Stan Lee cameo where he's like, Carol, how are the children? Spider-Man Homecoming is decent. Spider-Man Far From Home, I'm a bit on the fence about. Because Spider-Man kind of does some dumb decisions in that movie. Most notably, he gives Tony Stark's technology to the bad guy, and I just don't like how they made him even more Iron Man Jr. than he was in Spider-Man Homecoming. And just this, I felt like it felt a lot more flat as well. It didn't really take advantage of its European setting. I thought Far From Home is a step down from Homecoming. And unfortunately, guys, Spider-Man No Way Home is getting rave reviews. I'm a schlub in my garage. Well, I'm not in my garage right now, but I usually am. I'm just a schlub who talks about movies on YouTube to 100 subscribers. Or 200 now, 260. Anyway, I didn't like this movie. I liked it as I was watching it. I wasn't really bored. I walked out of the theater, and I was like, eh. And this movie is getting rave reviews, guys. On Rotten Tomatoes right now, it has a 94. And I'm in the minority, I guess. There's too much about this movie that was flawed. Now, don't dislike the video, okay? Just hear me out first, and if you don't like what I'm saying, comment down below. Don't just unsubscribe. Because that's what happened the last time I trashed Spider-Man. The last time I trashed Spider-Man, I lost 3 subscribers. That was on me. So, anyway, let's just go through it. I have my notes out here. The positives. This is the first of the MCU Spider-Man movies where the music worked. I wasn't a fan of the music in the previous 2 movies, but now the theme is starting to resonate with me. And I feel like the Avengers theme as well kind of did the same thing. How did the fucking Avengers theme go? But that Avengers theme, I didn't like it at first, but slowly they started reusing it, and by the time I heard it in, say, Endgame or Infinity War, I started becoming on board with Alan Silvestri's score. Same thing with this Spider-Man score, the ba-da-do-da-dee-da. I didn't really feel it in the first 2 Spider-Man movies. Here I'm starting to feel it a bit more. So that's a positive. First one of these Spider-Man movies where I noticed the score. It's nowhere near as good as Danny Elfman's score in the Sam Raimi movies, but it still has an identity of its own, and I appreciate it. Tom Holland is great as Spider-Man. He was great in the previous movies. He's still great in this one. I love Mary Jane. Mary Jane is usually the worst part of the Spider-Man movies. However, this is probably the best of the love interests. When you compare her to Mary Jane in the Sam Raimi movies, she's usually just whiny and complainy, and you kind of just don't like Mary Jane in those movies, despite being played by a really good actress. And Gwen Stacy, I thought she was a little better, but I feel like this MJ has a bit of an identity of her own. I think Zendaya does a really good job with this MJ. A lot of people on the internet find her annoying. I'm not one of them. I worked in a high school. I can easily see Zendaya's MJ being someone in a high school who's kind of awkward and kind of edgelordy, and so I like Ned. Ned, you gotta love Ned. And guys, as I remind you, this guys is a spoiler review. When the three Spider-Men are together, I really like their banter together. And guys, you know me, I'm a Sam Raimi Spider-Man fan. Of course, I see Tobey Maguire in the original Spider-Man suit. I'm gonna get a little giddy. No question about it. I think anyone would. The banter works, though. The banter between the three Spider-Men work. And what I liked is that they kind of redeemed Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, which Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man was kind of done dirty because he was given 2 movies. They kind of stunk. They pulled the plug on it. And the Andrew Garfield in this movie kind of makes up for that kind of missing arc from the previous 2 Amazing Spider-Man movies. There's a great moment in this, you see it in the trailer, where MJ, Zendaya, is falling, and the one who saves MJ turns out to be Andrew Garfield. So just stuff like that, I feel like they kind of redeemed Andrew Garfield. And the banter between all 3, when they go back and forth, Peter, which Peter, that Peter, kind of reminded me of this meme. But there's a great bit in here as well where Tobey Maguire complains about his back, which is a callback to Spider-Man 2. The Spider-Man banter really works in this. So that's kind of what I thought was positive. I was also liking the whole idea of Spider-Man having his identity being revealed and him having to live with that in the first act of the movie. I thought that was interesting. I wish they did it more throughout the whole movie. Had Tom Holland's Spider-Man struggle with having to hide from the paparazzi, and J. Jonah Jameson takes what he does and takes it out of context. I wish there was a bit more of that. It was mostly present in the first act, but as we get introduced to the classic villains, you kind of lose that as the movie progresses. Let's go through the movie chronologically as I kind of talk about what I didn't like. In that first act, Spider-Man's identity was revealed. That was the cliffhanger of the previous movie, Far From Home. And I like that. That was something we've never seen in a Spider-Man movie, and it's something I wish they kind of focused more on in this movie. But there's so much shit going on in this movie. Previous Spider-Man, previous villains. You can't really focus on it. And that's one thing I kind of didn't like. I wish they did focus on the more character stuff instead of having these callbacks. In that first act, there was a lot of plot inconsistencies as well, to the point where it was distracting. One that really stuck out to me is Flash Thompson. He goes back and forth between wanting people to know he's friends with Spider-Man and wanting to keep it a secret. So he gets accepted into MIT and says, oh, it's because I didn't say I was friends with Spider-Man. But then he's at an MIT party and he says, oh, can you tell people that I'm friends with Spider-Man? And it was just keep flip-flopping back and forth to the point where I'm like, this is a little inconsistent. I'm kind of lost what's going on here. And then they forget him for the whole movie. He's just in that first act. So yeah, a lot of just like plot inconsistencies in that first act. And I thought it was very poorly written. I thought that it was like kind of bad, that first act. And that's a complaint I see a lot on the internet, that the first half of this movie is really like yick when it comes to writing its plot. One of the problems I had with the previous Spider-Man movie, Far From Home, is the fact that Tom Holland does some very poor decisions, which I don't mind, but he kind of doesn't seem to acknowledge it. And that's doubled down in this movie. So the whole reason for this happening is Spider-Man goes to Doctor Strange, asks Doctor Strange to erase people's memory of him being Spider-Man. And as Doctor Strange is doing his magic spell, Spider-Man fucks everything up. And yeah, that causes all the villains to go into the Spider-Man MCU universe. So it's kind of hard to get behind this fucking hero that is constantly fucking up. And Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man fucked up as well. Like, he did some fucked up things. Like, he was doing some dumb decisions at certain points, but he kind of had to face the consequences a bit more. And that's what made Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man interesting, is the fact that he's this kid who's trying to juggle university life with his romantic life, with his Spider-Man life, and along the way he fucks up, but he has to, like, get back up. I feel like Tom Holland's Spider-Man, the way he's written, he never really faces the consequences of his actions. Like, the worst that happens is Doctor Strange goes to him and says, "Alright, Scooby-Doo this crap." And then he's like, whatever. I don't know. If that were my kid, if Tom Holland were my son, I would have spanked him. Spanked him. I'd be like, bad Tom Holland. Bad Spider-Man. The other big thing in this, that one was in the trailer, but this one, the other big mistake Tom Holland does in this movie is when Doctor Strange is about to send them all to their respective universes, Tom Holland basically pulls the plug on it and says no, which leads to basically the second half of the movie, which is all of these villains running around this city. All because Spider-Man didn't let Doctor Strange let these villains return to their respective universe. So again, those are two fuck-ups that Tom Holland does that kind of make me ugh. And some might say that the second fuck-up was kind of repaired by the fact that Spider-Man ended up curing all the villains, therefore he saved 6 lives. But Sandman didn't die in Spider-Man 3. Norman and Dr. Octopus, they die. Lizard, I can't remember. I can't remember the fucking Lizard movie and the Electro movies. But anyway, Aunt May died, and I'm sure in that battle in New York a lot of people died as well. I don't know, I feel like, sure you cured the villains, but I'm sure there's some other casualties that could have happened in there as well. But, yeah, let's not talk about those guys. And I feel like the way Spider-Man is written in this, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, I feel like he's written like a very selfish character. He fucked everything up. He got all these villains from different dimensions to come to his dimension and fuck everything up. And all he's worried about is him getting his friends into MIT. And he doesn't really care about himself getting into MIT. He just worries about his friends going into MIT, so he's not that selfish. But it's still pretty selfish, in my opinion. Because the reasons why they didn't get into MIT were his fault, and he's just trying to cover his own ass. Meanwhile, Doc Ock is destroying a fucking bridge. And he's like, wait, can you still get my friends into MIT? I don't know, I just didn't buy it. Those are some kind of nitpicks. Not really. I do find Tom Holland's Spider-Man a little selfish. That's not a nitpick. And that's something that's been ongoing throughout the whole trilogy of MCU movies. But other than that, I thought the CG and the way this movie was shot was very lazy. And that's something that's also true about the Marvel MCU Spider-Man as a whole. It's always shot very flat. The colors are very flat. The CG is kind of poor, especially the CG for Sandman in this movie. It really hasn't progressed all that much since the 2007 Spider-Man 3, which is kind of bad. The cinematography is very boring and plainly shot, and that wouldn't be a problem. But when you have the villains from the Sam Raimi movies, and when you have Tobey Maguire show up in this movie, and it's shot very flat, it just reminds me, wow, those first 3 Spider-Man movies, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, were so well shot. Sam Raimi, who directed the Evil Dead trilogy, he directed Oz the Great and Powerful, that's one of his trademark things. He's really good at directing cinematography. And every one of those movies has some very iconic shots. You think of Spider-Man 1, there's that iconic shot of Spider-Man hanging on the roof and a drop of blood drips down. Iconic shots like that. The whole subway fight Not subway fight, sorry. Well, yeah, the subway fight in Spider-Man 3 is very well shot, and the camera's swooping everywhere. And in Spider-Man 2, the train stopping sequence is very well shot. So many iconic shots in the original Spider-Man trilogy that are absent in the MCU Spider-Man trilogy. So that's an ongoing problem with the 3 movies that hasn't been repaired. I will even go as far as to say that the shots are even more lame in this movie. To me, the star of the show for the original Spider-Man movies was never really Tobey Maguire. It was never really Alfred Molina. It was never really Willem Dafoe. It was always Sam Raimi. That's what made the original trilogy good. So, to me, to have callbacks to Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus and Sandman, it doesn't really do anything to me, because I know the true star of the original trilogy was Sam Raimi, and he's not here. He is going to direct Doctor Strange 2, and that has me interested for Doctor Strange 2, but as far as this movie, not so much. The villains in here, speaking of the villains in here are kind of underdeveloped. They all just want to kill Spider-Man because in their previous universe, Spider-Man was evil, and therefore they want to kill Tom Holland's Spider-Man, which is very, very poor when it comes to its delivery. I never really felt attached to any one of these villains. And of course I'm attached to Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, but that's solely because of him in the original Spider-Man movie. And of course I'm attached to even Sandman, but that's solely because of his arc in the Spider-Man 3. I was never really attached to any of these villains. I kind of viewed them as different characters just because they didn't feel like the original characters. And some characters that I'm supposed to be nostalgic for, like Jamie Foxx as Electro, was very poorly developed in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and is still very poorly developed in this movie. So when we have a shot of Jamie Foxx looking out the window saying, "Ooh, I wish I had all that power. Look at that, all that potential energy. I wish all that potential energy was in my body." I'm like, yeah, this is the same character I don't give a shit about from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Not only that, but I feel like, and I hate to say this because I'm a fan of Alfred Molina and I'm a fan of Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe is actually my favorite actor working right now along with Joaquin Phoenix. There's some lines that kind of just felt phoned in. Like, there's no way of saying it. And I don't really blame the actors, I blame the writers, because some of the lines in here were just very questionable. But some of the lines in here were just very fanficky. And there's this interview I sent Jackie, my friend Jackie, I sent him an interview, and it's just the original cast from the original Spider-Man, Willem Dafoe and Alfred Molina, and they're just talking about, oh yeah, I really love being in this movie.
Doc Ock picks up where he left off.
What have you done with my machine?
He's looking for revenge.
You want to play games?
The Goblin believes in a world of losers and winners. Power is all that matters.
Yeah, that dialogue really feels fanficky. Some lines that I wrote down here. There's a line where Andrew Garfield says, "Oh, Gwen, she's the MJ from my universe." Come on. Is that a line in your movie? Come on. Seriously? There's a part where Doc Ock holds the arc reactor in his hand and says, "Finally, the power of the sun is in my hand." That felt fanficky. It really felt fanficky. A lot of it just feels like Reddit fanfic, like, ooh, what would happen if we took the Sam Raimi characters and put them in the MCU? It feels like that. There's a lot of moments where the movie pauses just to have the characters from the Sam Raimi movies interact with the MCU universe. And you're just like, There's like a part in here where Jamie Foxx is having a dialogue sequence with Sandman and saying, "I fell in a vat of electric eels." And then Sandman says, "That's ironic you said that, because I fell in a vat of sand." And it just feels very fanficky to the point where like that dialogue sequence is just there so people can be like, "Oh, they do have similar backstories." And I really didn't feel anything. That could have been cut out and I would have been like okay with it. So it sounds like I'm hating on the movie. I am kind of. I don't think this is a very good movie. I feel like it's not the best of the MCU Spider-Man movies. I thought Homecoming was definitely better. As far as it compared to Far From Home, it's about the same level as Far From Home, in my opinion. It just felt very fanficky. There's even a part in here where Norman Osborn says, "You know what? I'm something of a scientist myself." Get it? Like the memes on the internet? That's what I mean. It really felt... It reminded me a lot of Fast and Furious 9. Now, this is a better movie than Fast and Furious 9. Don't get me wrong. But it felt like Fast and Furious 9 in the sense that I felt like the writers just went on a Reddit chat board and like took some things from the Reddit chat board and threw it in a movie. To the point where it's jarring. And one of the reasons... I did a video on my channel of me reacting to the previous Spider-Man trailers. And I wasn't really excited for this movie. Yes, I was excited to see Tobey Maguire, as everyone else would be. But we just got into the Spider-Verse maybe 3 years ago. And I thought that was a really good movie. And I feel like structurally, Into the Spider-Verse is a much better movie than this movie here. I thought this movie was kind of all over the place. And I really didn't feel anything for the characters. Aunt May dies in this movie. And I really didn't feel anything. And the reason why I didn't feel anything is because throughout the whole MCU, Aunt May is basically just a bimbo. The only thing they do with Aunt May is, haha, isn't it funny that Aunt May is hot? This character that's usually played by an old hag is now played by Marissa Tomei. So when she dies, I kind of just didn't feel anything. Yeah, and there are some moments where I did feel something. The one part that kind of got me, and I was like, that was well written, was the part at the end where Spider-Man goes to remind MJ of who he is and notices a bandage on MJ's forehead and then refrains from telling her his true identity. I thought that was a really good scene. But those scenes with heart were kind of lacking, and those that did have heart were kind of too dependent on the Sam Raimi movies or the nostalgia for the Andrew Garfield movies. That said, I do kind of like where Spider-Man is headed. One of the complaints I have is that Spider-Man is too high-tech. Well, they tease that in the next Spider-Man movie, he's not going to have Stark technology, and they show the new suit, and the new suit is basically just a spandex suit like the other Spider-Man movies. So that I'm excited for. They do like a fake death in this, where they were gonna kill Tobey Maguire, and I would have been fucking pissed if that happened. But they don't kill Tobey Maguire, he's still alive at the end. And the fact that Sam Raimi is directing Doctor Strange 2 still leaves the door open for a Spider-Man 4 with Tobey Maguire. In my opinion, anyway. It might not happen, but I really wish it does happen. I also like the fact that now Spider-Man kind of feels disconnected from the MCU. A problem I had with Spider-Man Homecoming is that it's basically Tony Stark and Iron Man. Spider-Man is Tony Stark's bitch. And then in Far From Home, Spider-Man is basically Nick Fury's bitch. And in this one, he's kind of just Doctor Strange's bitch. Now it feels like Spider-Man is going to be disconnected from the MCU, which has me excited. Maybe you can just have him confront one of the classic villains from the Rogues Gallery. Have Spider-Man fight maybe just one villain like Chameleon, and I'll be perfectly happy with that. So I kind of like where Spider-Man is headed, if it's less dependent on the MCU. As far as this movie goes, not that big into it. This isn't the best MCU movie out there. MCU movies I thought were better. I thought Iron Man 3 was better. I thought Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2 were better. I thought Infinity War was better. I thought Civil War was better. I thought Endgame was better. Yeah, I thought Homecoming was better. Yeah, so this is like middle tier MCU. Middle to bottom tier. But, guys, don't take my word for it. What did you guys think of Spider-Man Far From Home? Am I the only crazy person out there who wasn't a fan of it? Comment below, let me know, and I'll see you guys around.